Now being recorded.
Okay, good. Great. Okay, so just to say then, it's the usual sort of format as before. You'll remember probably that the dialing in, if you lose the line, if it's ever happened to you, if not, you probably won't remember. But there's a little green icon up at the top. The instructions for this are down on the bottom of the screen there. So if you lose that, if you just choose Connect My Audio, it opens up that window and you just go through that same process of entering your phone number and going through that process again. So it's all pretty old hat to you all by now, I should think. So what we're going to be talking about tonight then is, find your script. I'd just like to, we talked to some primary teachers a couple of nights ago, and they were very upset by their SAT scores, basically, as you can probably imagine. If you've seen what the results are like, they're considerably less than they have been previously in terms of percentage of pupils meeting the floor standard. And I wanted to ask you a bit about, not going to dwell on it for too long, but just sort of pick your brains a little bit about what the implications for that might be for secondary schools, because I know, well, we'll come on to that anyway. Then want to, so that if you remember, the main theme of these sessions has been assessment, so we'll have a quick recap on that, see if there's any development in the thinking since last time we talked, or just generally actually where you're up to with that. And we've also done a bit of research for clients lately where we've asked about kind of subsidiary, well, I think even as subsidiary assessments, non-curriculum assessments. So I want to ask you a bit about those. Then come on to the curriculum itself, so I'm trying to get a handle on, now that things have, I suppose, settled in a bit, or at least you know more about what options people have gone for, or what A-level numbers are perhaps looking like for next year, those sorts of things. A bit about budgets. The data I've got for that is obviously somewhat undermined by the referendum and the potential for the impact on the economy for that, but want to pick your brains about that. And then just to ask you some stuff about I don't know if you saw the report we put out based on the feedback from teachers thinking about the white paper which we ran over the Easter holidays, just to discuss a little bit about the findings of that, particularly about the maths side of things, which I imagine you're all thinking about at some level, if you're not already a math, or even if you are. And possibly a couple of other things at the end that we might get onto depending on how we go. So that's essentially it. I can just see Helen is just dialing in, so I'll just wait for the next ding and then we'll get going. And whilst we're doing that, I'll just do a bit of tidying up on the desktop. Just bear with me a sec. Simon, did you have some trouble logging out and having to log back in or something?
It just kicked me out, and I appeared to be back in again. The line has always been fine, so with everything you said.
Yeah, okay.
But it just kicked me out. My internet's working fine, but
okay, strange. Okay, thanks. And Helen, welcome. Well done.
Hi, sorry, just got in. I'm sorry I'm late.
No, that's fine. You're actually, I suppose, bang on time. You've just missed the preamble, which I did whilst I could see you dialing in. What the heads and deputies we have with us at the moment are Helen, Matthew, Simon, Stuart, Tim and Zoe. Matt's going off at 6 o'clock to see a parent, which is obviously an important thing to do. Good. So, first of all, just want to kind of kick off with some stuff about assessment. And one of the things that we have noticed quite a bit over the years talking to secondary teachers is the sort of, I suppose, mistrust of SAT scores. If you talk to mathematicians in particular, they've always said they didn't really trust the sort of level of maths that the SAT scores were telling them their Year 7 students had, because they, the general feeling being that primary schools perhaps over-prepared students. But I just want to see what you think about this data that's coming through now. So this is, I just put together this little summary about the SAT scores that came out this week, wasn't it, Tuesday? So just skipping that, ignoring the first line for a minute. So 66% expected standard in reading, 70 in maths, 72 in SPAG, 74 in writing, which is all kind of there or thereabouts, but combined, the percentage of students who got all three, reading, writing and maths, is only 53%. So compare that, the paragraphs underneath those bullet points there, the paragraphs there just summarise last year compared to this in primary schools. So tougher standards, that was to be expected, but the percentages have really come down a lot. So numbers passing have come down a lot. The percentage required to get to the standards have gone up a lot, and obviously the two are correlated. So we've gone from 46% in maths going up to 54.5% in the new standards, and from 36% in reading to 42% in reading. So that's just illustrative of the fact that they're tougher. I just wanted to see what you think of that. Well, first of all, not this year, but next year, 2017, secondary schools will be having to put students in for resits for this, assuming the white paper goes through with that still in. I'm just wondering if any of you have thought about that, if you were expected to do anything particular in response to that. Will you do revision sessions for students? Anyone want to say anything about that, first of all?
I think it has to, security, I think it has to start with closer links with your primaries, and really you've got to be in and working with them throughout year 6, because otherwise you're going to have that situation where they're hot house till May and then they do nothing, find out the results in July, and then you've got to pick them up in September. So really, it is going to be a challenge to motivate them and a challenge to get it sorted, but so I think the only way it can work is with the closer links.
Okay, so you think you'll actually work more strongly with the kids whilst they're still in primary schools to try and help them get over that threshold?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's going to happen. Sorry, someone else speaking. Yeah. I think that is a really valid point. I mean, if you've actually looked, I'm an English teacher by trade, well, I was when I started, and the tests that actually they're conducting now at primary school, I mean, there's no way our Year 7 teachers cover the depth and detail of the sort of work that they have to do at primary school to do the stats, and there needs to be some sort of more links forged with primaries, where certainly our Year 7 teachers or anyone who teaches a Year 7 class is going in to aid that transition a lot more smoother, because what they're actually doing is, in the transition between primary school to coming into secondary, I mean, our primary colleagues would say the same, is they're becoming a bit more de-skilled, and when they start secondary, that first year, they're actually losing a lot of the grammatical and skills that they pick up at primary, and because of the other curriculum sort of demands when they get to secondary school. So certainly from an English perspective, I totally agree with what was just said then, that they really need to tighten up those links for aiding smoother transition between our feeder primaries and us, basically, and then it's something that we've started looking at already, and we're getting a lot more staff out into our feeder primary schools, and we're getting a lot more of the pupils in more than we've ever done before, starting at Year 5 now. We have a lot more taste days, we have a lot more G&T sessions to get these pupils in our school, and actually to engage in a dialogue with our primary colleagues as well, to ensure that de-skilling doesn't actually happen. So,
and what sort of resources will you be using? That's this generally, whether you're doing just the sort of thing that Simon and Matt have just been saying now about working with primary schools, or whether it's addressing them in Year 7. Obviously, there are no past papers for this.
Well, we did a training day a couple of years ago, and the purpose of it really was to say that a lot of staff in secondary underestimate what is happening in primary in terms of the level of work and the depth of what they're doing, and that was before, this amount of increased rigour, and I think that was really valuable, because the primary schools brought in examples of what the students were doing with them, and then we shared what was happening at secondary school as well, but a number of staff commented on it was an eye-opener just to be able to see firsthand what was happening in primary school. One of our issues would be, I mean, links are absolutely fantastic, yeah, and we really must try to do that, but we do have 30 feeder primary schools. Obviously some are more key than others, but there's a sort of a logistical challenge there.
Right. So do you think then that means you'll be needing to kind of beef up either what you do in Year 7 or the sort of liaison work that you do with primary schools? Will you need it to be ratcheting up the level of difficulty of your primary, I don't know, classroom tasks or homework tasks, that sort of thing?
I think what we're aiming to do is to get to know the kids academically much more. In the past we've done that very well pastorally, but really to know about the strengths and weaknesses in writing and in numeracy and so on, so that we can continue that work, because we'll have an idea of who's not going to have made the standard, and so we can continue to support them.
Okay.
With some exams as well, and I'm not sure whether this does apply to SATs, but you can have a complete breakdown of the skill level and where students have achieved better in, certain areas, and I think that sort of level of detail would be really important, particularly when we're going to have to ask them to retake, because you really need to pinpoint the bits where they are weaker.
Okay.
What we're trying to do, I mean, this is only an idea at the moment, is based on what was just said then about the actual depth and detail of the analysis that's provided from the test now at Key Stage 2. It really does pinpoint the specific skills that they need to develop. So at Year 7, we tried to make some more room in the curriculum in English to give them an additional lesson. And in that additional lesson, it'll be almost targeted intervention depending on the skills that are identified from the Key Stage 2 test, but also when they do the baseline assessments, the CATs, when they first get into our school, and then that additional lesson then would focus on specific skills. Now, you're going to have issues with grouping and whether one large cohort needs to look at a particular aspect, but it is something that we're trying to work out now in these next couple of weeks before we finish for the summer, to use that additional lesson to actually pinpoint the skills that they're still lacking in from the Key Stage 2 test, the detail that's given to us. So that's one aspect that we're trying to combat. But from that respect, to sort of bridge that gap and aid that transition to make sure they still sustain that progress that they've made at primary and Year 6.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Helen, what do you think about all this? What's happening in your school?
Sorry, I was typing because I didn't want to interrupt people.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, in terms of what have we got in terms of resources, we haven't got anything for this, the Year 6 stuff at the minute. We have, in anticipation of it, we have, from this September, although obviously you don't have to retake this September, but we've taken a lesson in Year 7 and Year 8 away from history and geography, so it'll be 3 a fortnight instead of 4. English get the extra lesson in Year 7, and maths will get it in Year 8 because there's more maths content as well. So that's one way that we're kind of giving them more time. But in terms of resources to be able to do it, I'm in the weird position, and so is my head teacher actually, that our daughters have both taken the SATs this year, and we're coming up to Year 7. So we kind of saw it from the parents' point of view as well, and just ridiculous what they're expected to do.
Really?
I mean, I've no surprise that the standards have changed, because that was the whole point of it. We've also looked. When I say looked, we've discussed as a first time at because we use the SAT to do the FST target setting. So if they're getting lower results, and that feeds into the machine saying what the targets are for the end of Key Stage 4, does that mean they're going to end up with lower targets? And how does that then affect us?
Yeah.
So it's more than just looking at Year 7. It's looking at it from lots of angles, I think.
Okay. And these, just thinking about it from the primary school's point of view then, so they've got, Nicky Morgan actually promised that, because previously 5% of schools had fallen below the floor standard, and she'd promised no more than 1 percentage point more, i.e. 6% wouldn't fall under. But if this 53% obviously this is across pupils and not across schools, but if that translates across schools, then it'll be more like 12% of schools falling below floor standards. And remember that the coasting schools thing, which is the bit where the government's promising / threatening to force primary schools to become academies, is 85% over 3 years. That's what they've got to achieve. It's all
and it's a surprise to us that these figures have come out right.
Yeah, it is bizarre, isn't it? I know. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, as I was saying at the start, maths teachers in particular, but secondary schools in general, have said to us for years that they think that primary schools are pushing students to the test, like teaching to the test, and that was one of the reasons why national curriculum levels were scrapped even. So I'm just wondering if these numbers from Tuesday this week and the threat of coasting schools and all this and the bigger number that's fallen below the floor standards, do you think this is going to put more pressure on primary schools to teach this test? And if so, what effect is that going to have on secondary schools?
I think that primaries probably will feel a real pressure because of the threat of floor standards, and there's just a number of the white paper basically is allowing them to throw, or the government to throw more and more arrows, and it just depends which label you've got around your neck as to whether you get hit or not by the various darts which are being thrown. I think, but I think that it's naturally going to bring pressure to bear, and actually I think it's just the wrong thing. We're sort of moving into a system where the accountability measures are becoming so oppressive that the thing which is being lost is the students' learning. And that just seems to be absolutely absurd. Okay. That I just think that we're losing sight of what we're really trying to do. I have no issue with trying to raise standards and no issue with over time, increasing the requirements. I know we probably do need a degree of measure at some point, but I think the way that the accountability system is operating at the moment is probably going to negatively impact the quality and breadth of the education which is being offered, rather than doing the other thing of actually trying to increase the standard, because the accountability measure is so. I suppose I'm not quite sure what the word is, but yes, that's quite a good word. Yes, that'll do. But equally, I can see that there's an issue. From my perspective, if we've a potential large number of students coming that aren't secondary ready, for the requirement to resit is going to require teacher retraining to a point. Okay.
So do you think that? So I noticed. Sorry to, but I noticed Helen and Simon have agreed there with what you're saying, and just ask this more generally. Do you think that then that means, because if what you're saying is true, that they are teaching more, even more?
I'm thinking of our local situation. There are some schools that have really got an attitude that, the kids do their SATs, but it's not made a really big thing, and they are outstanding schools. Okay. Where there's a much more, I don't believe it's a relaxed attitude, but it's kind of played down, and the whole sort of ethos and atmosphere is different, and those schools have always come out as really outstanding, and I think it'd be interesting to see further analysis of that, because the kind of knee-jerk reaction will be, of course, to be cramming all the information into kids and be very knowledge-based and work towards the SATs. But there may be evidence to show that actually, it's much bigger than that, the success of students.
So you're saying for some schools it could actually probably have the opposite effect, because they would sort of throw their hands up and say, well, this is plainly ridiculous.
Yes.
Yeah, and I suppose the other aspect of it, of course, is that this is only the attainment floor standard. There's also the progress one, which will be gradually rolling through, which may be a bit more favourable to schools as well.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So we've got a few comments in the pod there about teaching to the test and making less prepared in other subject areas. I know I wanted to ask you a bit about science at A level a bit later on as well as in the curriculum section, but I guess generally science is likely to take an even further hit if they go the way we started talking about, but hopefully Zoe's perspective there comes through strongly. Okay, so I just want to, I don't want to dwell too much on anticipating that because it's still very new, and we did talk to some primary teachers about it, as I say, primary heads on Tuesday. So I just then wanted to come on to thinking about what you're doing for assessment sort of more prosaically than we've been sort of speculating on just now. I just wondered if I could ask you all just quickly to type into the chat pod a sort of brief outline of what you're doing for your formal assessment in Key Stage 3 and 4. So are you doing sort of end of unit tests, end of year tests? And I'm thinking in particular whether that's a sort of whole school policy. So, for example, you might type in my school, English, Science and Maths all do an end of unit test and an end of year test, but everyone else does their own thing. So I'm thinking about that sort of level. You know, what's the whole school picture for it? And I'm thinking across both Key Stage 3 and 4, and if there's any sort of tie-up with that. I know we talked about this before, that the removal of levels allows a greater continuity of assessment through 3 and 4. But yeah, if you could just, you know, do you do the same thing? Do you do something different? So I'll just give you a 30 seconds, if that's enough, to just jot down what's going on in assessment in your school. And in the meantime, I'll make this chat pod bigger, so hopefully that doesn't freak you out.
Oh, that's scary. It just moved.
Sorry. There we are. So I just made the writing a bit bigger. That's not freaked you out at all. So what do we said? Okay, yeah, thanks, Matt. Notice you're using cats. That's going to be one of my next questions. So, Matt, when you say they're Year 8-3 summative assessments, that suggests once a term? Is that about?
Yeah, we've moved to termly now. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm guessing
I've just put a bit further down as well. I think I'm in charge of teaching and learning. For me, formative assessment is the key anyway. I think that obviously you do need to summatively assess and you need that hard, raw data, but the skill-based language of learning that pupils get on a daily basis and in the books and the marking and the feedback, that for me is the priority. And as long as that is skills-based and linked into the curriculum, then pupils will make progress and they'll know what skills they need to develop. Now you need to tie that obviously more holistically, and that's when we would do those summative assessments. But for me, it's that daily diet of formative assessment that's more important.
Okay, good. Yeah, I want to ask about formative. What is that? Yeah. Okay. Good. So it sounds as if there's a lot of formal assessment going on. So lots of termly and yearly tests. Yeah, so some mention of targets there. Can I just ask this generally? Are targets, are they sort of still very much on the menu in assessment, or are they a bit sort of passé now? Do your school still setting targets and monitoring?
Very much, yes, very, very heavily.
Okay. And
we're moving away
quite
from targets.
Sorry.
Okay. General assent there. I guess assent to them carrying on. So, is this assessments you've all mentioned there? Are they going? Is it the same thing going across 3 and 4, Key Stage 3 and 4? We talked before, I think, probably in both previous assessment discussions we've had this year about the sort of flight path model measuring progress towards GCSE grades from Key Stage 2 results. Any change there? Anyone doing anything different last time?
Ours is changing a little bit, as I've put from September. We've previously had your assessments at Key Stage 3 were normally 1.5 term, apart from subjects like art and drama and ICT, where you didn't have as many. So that's why I put at least 4, because most would do them half-termly, but at least 4. And we were encouraging staff to do as wide a range of types of assessment as possible. So one, it covers kind of all the skills and the kids that are better at presentations than written work and so on. And also for marking purposes for the staff, to keep things sensible, because that's alongside their normal marking. But we've said from September there needs to be kind of a move towards this. All assessments have to have a similar format to GCSE, although of course for some of them we don't even know what the GCSE format is properly yet. But anyway, that they've got to have those kind of skill type questions and the GCSE star questions right from early on, because previously it was much wider range of types of assessment at Key Stage 3, and obviously Key Stage 4 was very much exam based type assessments. Past papers, past questions, or whatever. But now we're sort of moving that further down the school.
Okay, that's interesting. In fact, that's kind of leads on. Let's just jump ahead and put that poll in here next. So, I'm thinking, I've just asked you here specifically about end-of-year assessments. It looked as if, I think at least 4 of you mentioned end-of-year assessments. So I'm just wondering what you use for those predominantly. You can choose more than one of these if it's a mixture. So, are you buying them in? Sorry?
Is there a way to submit that once you've done it?
It just does it automatically, but
okay.
I'll broadcast the results when you've all voted. So are you paying for them? Are you finding free ones from, I don't know, the internet? Are you developing your own?
Key Stage 3 or 4?
What was that, sorry, Matt?
Is it Key Stage 3 or 4 you're talking about, sorry?
Oh, that's a good question. Both, I suppose. So if you're using
the only problem is at Key Stage 3 we do teacher assessments apart from the CATs when they first come in, but Key Stage 4 obviously we get the exams that are available from the exam boards.
All right, okay. So,
apart from where they're now not.
Yeah, I was just wondering about that.
Sorry, I'm probably being a bit selfish as an English teacher there, because there's still a bit of AQA obviously provided those already now for the new Year 10s.
All right. Are you finding the sample ones reliable? I don't suppose you can.
We've just done one. We've just done a mock exam, a full mock exam in the hall with Year 10. I was marking them this afternoon. The new papers, they're obviously very challenging, certainly for the cohort that we serve. There's a lot difference in the changes of how much they have to cover in the language and the literature, but the papers are decent. AQA are usually quite good. The mark schemes, obviously they'll go through a transition and obviously a moderation process, but what they've provided is quite good.
Okay.
The problem is you do have is we've got the same for A-level for us. They might well give one sample paper, which of course you tend to use for your mock exam, whenever your mock exam is. But the rest of the year, in terms of trying to find similar questions or similar style questions, that creates a problem, because teachers tend to use over time, past papers as they build up.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. Can I just ask then about the paid for published ones, which 2 of you are using? Obviously, one of our clients has asked us to ask you about this in particular. So, what sort of assessments are worth paying for? Why do you sometimes pay for them when most of it seems to be free or things that you've developed in-house?
It's a bit of a combination, really. It's a paid-for package that just makes putting together assessments very easy.
Okay. What sort of thing is that?
So it would be things like Exam Pro that supports the AQA board.
Okay.
Which just obviously you can pick the level.
We pay for the GL assessment caps, and we pay for the GL assessment reading tests at Year 7. Obviously the reading tests go all the way through to Key Stage 4. That's the only package we pay for in Year 7.
Okay.
We use Pixel, which I counted as paid for because it's part of a...
Yeah, that's true.
It does cost.
Okay.
And there have been upsides and downsides to using that.
So let's just think about that then.
Massively.
So I can see why Exam Pro is used and those sort of test building things from past paper questions. Why do you go for things like CAT or Pixel, or somebody mentioned something else? Oh, Midius, somebody mentioned in the
we do Midius and ALPS. We do those because they're the ones that we use for target setting, not for assessing, but the ones that we do for target setting, we use those because they've got massive samples of hundreds of thousands of students.
Okay.
So presume they're reasonably reliable.
So and things like Midius tell you a different aspect of that student, sort of the more innate ability, which is really important to sort of compare with where they are on the attainment, in terms of knowledge, etc., etc.
Okay, those are sort of capacity to learn tests, aren't they?
Mm. Yeah, and I completely agree, because it's going to get even worse with the stuff they're doing in the Key Stage 2. So I'm not a fan of the Key Stage 2 stats, as you can tell, having gone through it with my daughter this year, but I wasn't before that. The stuff that they're making them do is ridiculous. It doesn't really give us a proper picture, particularly and we've got some lovely feed schools that, they're all trying to do the same thing, and they do teach to the test, and it doesn't give you a proper representation of what that child is like or what that child's abilities are. I don't think the stats are worth a piece of paper they're written on.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Interesting.
And you've always been able to have a sort of a coasting child as well, who perhaps hasn't performed very well, but their ability is so much greater than that, and things like that need to be highlighted, or somebody who's made exceptional progress, but their ability, doesn't reflect that. So you do need to unpick that, and after all, they're all individuals, aren't they? So we do need that sort of level of information.
Right. Good. Can I just ask you then, if you're looking for any form of assessment, whether they're free ones, I guess if we're talking about past papers, I suppose we understand why you would use those. So let's not cover the sample assessment materials that awarding bodies provide, because obviously we know about them. But if you were going for, so you mentioned a few benefits there of things like CATS and ALPS and Alice and Yellis and those sorts of stuff. But in general, for those kind of end-of-year curriculum assessments, you just type into this box that I've laid over the top of the chat pod here. What tools and features do you look for in an assessment for those end-of-year things? And a client's obviously asking us to ask you about this with a view to providing some. So if you're not buying them, obviously some of you buy them for other reasons, if not for end-of-year tests. So presumably there is some scope for this, in particular at the moment when there's not much available from the awarding bodies. I'll just ask you to type it into there, and then I'll show you what everyone said. Bigger. Okay, so I've only got 3 in there so far, so presumably the rest of you 4 don't particularly look for anything. Which is fair enough.
Mine says answer is submitted. I don't know if you've got it.
Yeah, we've got 5 now. I'll put them up. Okay, so now we've got mark schemes, gap analysis ability, clear links to spec, support packages online. Yep. So I'll just change order. Genuinely measure what the students covered, something reliable and user-friendly, tried and tested, coverage of content skills, Matt's in the chat. Let's just reveal Matt's chat. Budget constraints. Okay, unlikely that your buying is focused beyond horticulture. Okay, thanks, Matt. That's fair enough. Reference for national cohort, easy to use. Okay, great. So, yeah, reference to national cohort. I guess there's. I suppose I might have expected to see a bit more of that in there, but maybe that's not generally being done. So I'm thinking, previously we had past papers for GCSEs that we could mark, and it would tell us roughly what grade we would expect the kids to get if that's how they performed. Similarly, at one time we had Key Stage 3 SATs, and we've also had resources which were linked to national curriculum levels, all of which have gone. So I suppose I might have expected more of the requirement for sort of national referencing, standardisation. Is that just not something that you particularly need, or is it something that's just not available, therefore it's not really part of the thinking at the moment?
I think it depends what year group you're talking about. If you're talking about a lower year group, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get anything that's particularly valid or easy to measure, because it really does depend on your curriculum.
Okay.
There's so many imponderables there. I wouldn't even think of looking at it, frankly, until perhaps the end of year 10.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I think you probably summarised that for everybody there. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, agree.
Good. Okay, so I just wanted to ask about this little thing as well, which I just found online this week when I was looking for something else. I wondered if any of you had seen it. It's Pearson's Progress Maps. So this is just a screen grab from their website. If you want to look at it in more detail, this web link here, if you click on that, that'll open up the sign-up page, and do it afterwards. But you can sign up to it and look at the real thing. But essentially, what is it? It's the curriculum. I don't know how well you can read this bit, but essentially, let's just have a pointer. We've got so this is a subject, biology. This is a topic. This is a subtopic. This is a bit of the progress descriptor. So I imagine, because this is Pearson, I imagine this is a Pearson EdXL curriculum. And then the whole curriculum is divided up into these things they've called steps. And the steps are shown in this diagram underneath here. And there's a bit of a description there. So 11 to 16, this is science, shows 12 steps. First step's roughly equivalent to the old National Curriculum Level 3. 12th step is highest GCSE performance. And then expected average performance is 1 step per year. So they've sort of broken up the whole curriculum from year 7 to 11.
What's that based on? What's that? The example of expected progress. Where's that expected progress coming from?
I think this is their own. These steps are their own, entirely their own kind of overlay on the curriculum. I would imagine.
All right. So there's no link with the new 91 or anything like that, is there not? I was trying to make sense of that.
Yeah, I don't think the 10, 11 and 12 are equivalent to the top 3 grades at GCSE necessarily, no, but I
just think it might create more sense of confusion and ambiguity, certainly, to introduce.
Absolutely.
I would agree. It's just more numbers.
Okay. Okay, but actually one of the things, one of the things I was interested in particular was that, notice this bit at the bottom here. So in our published resources, steps may be shown like this. So I don't know anything more about this other than what I've seen very, very briefly looking at this thing today. But I imagine what they're trying to do here is, at one time there's a big thing where publishers would always try and show the national curriculum level or this sort of grade in GCSEs that this particular chapter or topic or page in a textbook, for example, related to. So I guess this is an attempt for them to break up their whole curriculum and specifications into chunks so that you can identify their published resources alongside it.
Why wouldn't they?
I like the idea, but why haven't they used? Sorry, it sounds like me critical, and I hope there isn't somebody from them listening in.
I don't think there is.
I don't understand. Why are you doing your own 12 steps? Do you know what I mean? If you're going to be doing something like that, which can be useful, why not use, the 9 to 1?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of schools have done the flight path based on that, haven't they?
Mm.
And I think remember last time saying, and certainly we are getting staff to, or have got staff to, write their own.
Yeah, we're doing
like
the same,
what
yeah.
used to be grade descriptors, national curriculum descriptors. We've got our own 9 to 1 descriptors
Yeah.
for all subjects. That sort of thing would seem to make more sense, because then you'd have more chance of wanting to use it because you know what level it's based at.
Okay.
Exactly.
Your own.
Yeah, it does add another level of complication.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no commonality of language.
There and blown it at the end for me.
Okay.
Scale. I think it's great that they've laid it out in that progressive linear way. That's lovely. Teachers are looking for that. Save some time, and then blown it with the number scale.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Comes up nicely.
okay. So, are none of you doing anything? It sounds as if you're all going for something essentially based on the new GCSE grades. Is that right? None of you have gone for something different or new or
No.
to do?
No, it's the 1 to 9.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Well,
same here.
that uncovered that fairly effectively. Good. So now I was just interested to see that they'd done that, and I remember they were doing something like this a long time ago when National Curriculums first went, that they were going to come up with their own scheme, and that's the first sort of example I've seen of it. Okay, good. So one of the reasons I think they probably went for that was that it's so at the moment you're all saying that you, even at Key Stage 3, it sounds as if ultimately you're targeting your GCSE grades, and I know some of you were saying last time that you're starting even in Year 7, working through the grades, and some of you have had sub-grades in there because getting through one grade within a year is beyond some students, and they feel as if there's no progress if they don't have these sub-grades. So there's all those sorts of refinements to that.
Yeah, but it just does bring about this commonality of language, and it's, life is confusing enough anyway for staff, let alone for the students.
Yeah, no, that's and just for you to be able to talk amongst yourselves like this, that's obviously a benefit of using those grades as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard much during the last term, even during the last year, where people are routinely talking about progress during the year. It all seems to be still very much about attainment. It's all, we're recording what grade people are, what potential grade they're on, what sub-grade they're on.
We're looking heavily at progress. The language really is around progress. How many levels of progress, expected progress, right from the reporting stage, the language in the classroom.
Okay.
It's fully embedded.
And is that
got an Ofsted focus? The progress in the books is absolutely critical now. You've got to demonstrate that, show that.
So you're actually
We had an external presenter in yesterday who was talking about how Raise Online will go next year, and that holistic progress across the country would be almost impossible to map, that they weren't going to replace it with anything. So I agree that the progression within the books is the key, but then I still think then it'll be that formative language of learning and skill-based that will be more important.
Okay. So, Zoe and Simon, just coming back to what you were just saying there about progress, it sounds to me as if that's, well, I'll ask that as a question. Is that language of progress part of your dialogue with students?
Yes, very much so, yes. So are you making, what sort of progress are you making? On the reports, it reports on excellent progress, some progress, etc., etc.
Okay.
And we would be asking the students, how do you know you're making progress, and how can you make further progress?
Can I just clarify that when you're talking about progress now, it's actually based on a separate baseline for each student. So if you're talking to John in Year 7 or Mary in Year 9, if you're talking about progress for them, you'd know what their Key Stage 2 data was? Or
yes, because within our, sort of data groups, it's broken down into specific groups. So you might, within your class, look at your higher level, medium level, lower level ability, and be looking at progress linked to that particular student, and then there's all the sort of the drilling down to disadvantaged students and the progress that they're making, groups of boys as opposed to groups of girls. So the whole thing is a kind of a data matrix, really, but about progression and comparative progression of groups and things, but then within the classroom bringing that back to the individual and the individual set of circumstances. So the lower ability student, their progress will probably look very different from a very high ability student, and it will be at a different rate. But
and all that stuff is critically important from a classroom teacher and leader at any level to grasp all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then verifying one of them is getting the teachers to understand the pedagogy required for that child to make different types of children to make progress with different starting points, and also to get a concept in the kid's head and a clear picture of actually what it looks like. So if you're looking for more sophisticated writing, actually, from where you are now to where we think you could end up, it looks a bit like this, John. So let's have a little talk about that. What's so it's those kinds of conversations, because that's what we do, isn't it, as teachers? We try and change people's minds and make people realise they can move forward, and these are the sorts of things they need to do and how they need to go about doing it.
So you're moving down to talking about the use of data, aren't you? That's interesting that's becoming so embedded. I'm really pleased. That sounds a bit patronising. I'm pleased to hear that's cool. And Tim, I just noticed in your chat here you've said, it's a few lines up, no targets 7, 8, 9, 4 levels of progress target, but tricky due to expected progress lack of expected progress.
Yeah.
What do you do with that then?
Well, we're kind of running a bit of a middle ground in that we've tried to map over what we understood from the older system, and that we're aiming for 4 levels of progress target anyway, and then try to map across. Well, if a C grade is broadly equivalent here, a B grade might be broadly equivalent here. So we're trying to do an estimate, but until we get those sort of national expectations of what that progress, the expected progress is likely to look like, it's going to be a bit difficult. So we're making sort of slight stabs in the dark. But having said that, we removed the attainment targets from years 7, 8, and 9, and that's been really helpful actually.
Okay.
Because we've just been asking students to respond to the feedback that they've got and improve their ability to do whatever the teachers ask them to do in that subject area. So you get some feedback, you work on it to try and improve your ability to engage and operate within the sphere of that subject, and keep going, because it takes a long time, I think, to be completely master a subject. So we feel reasonably confident that we're not going to run out of feedback to give, if you see what I mean. And that's been really helpful for students, I think.
Okay.
Because they
just talking about an age-related expectations model, would that mean that at every different year group that a level 6 would look differently for a year 7 to a year 8 to a year 9? Is that what Stuart's just written in?
Yeah, that's right. So if a student came in and we targeting them at a level 6, we think they're at a grade 6, and we think they're at a grade 6, they would remain at a grade 6 if they were on track right the way through. If in year 9 they suddenly dropped to a grade 5, they weren't making the expected progress that we thought, then obviously we would intervene, but the student would sort of keep getting reported that they're on track for a grade 6 at the end of it.
Okay.
Do you find that difficult with, in terms of the expectations of what a grade 6 will actually look like?
Yeah, that's been the challenge, particularly with some subjects such as English, where a lot of the skills are similar from one year group to another.
How do we talk to parents as well? Do they understand?
We think it will make it easier for parents, because they'll know instantly, in all these sort of numbers and levels that are flying about, they'll have an instant understanding. If they're predicted or they're expected to be on a grade 6, and they're currently we're saying that they're on track for a grade 5, then clearly there's an issue. But the challenge has been for staff to try and come up with what we would class as a grade 6 or a grade 5
It's actually what parents want, isn't it? More
level.
than
You see, I think what's quite an interesting question though is that in schools across the country, we're probably all kind of going, I reckon this is a grade 5 and I reckon this is a grade 6, and there will naturally be variations just because we're not all working together in that expectation in this area at the moment, in terms of nobody really knows exactly. We can estimate and we'll be able to use our professional experiences to try and get pretty close. But all that we're doing is we're just moving around within the confines of the bell curve, if you see what I mean. Yeah. And so, we can't get away from the fact that it's all about really competition between schools in terms of grades. We know there's going to be broadly, certain standards hopefully will equate to certain grades when they're awarded. But if 40% of children are going to get a grade 4 and below nationally, and that's just going to be the standard application of the normal distribution curve, then kind of all of the things we're doing is we're giving best guesses, but we've got no concrete sort of information around that until we start getting some sort of solidity in terms of the standards and things like that.
Can I just ask a question now, directly related to the range of things that people have been talking about? So it's a difficulty, as you say, Tim, for you, for awarding bodies, I suppose, so far, for publishers to know what the grades look like. But it also sounds so I'm just sitting here imagining I'm one of our clients. Lots of our clients are publishers, and they ask us to ask you questions, basically to find out what kind of resources you need to help improve your lot and your teaching and learning. And a large part of what publishers do is try to provide sort of formative assessments to help you, give kids more practice and help their understanding through practice, those sorts of formative things. But part of formative has always been and always has to be some kind of norm referencing or criteria referencing, so that you know that it's appropriate and that you can show they've made progress. If you just ask them irrelevant questions, it might be formative, but it'd be useless. So it's obviously got to have some structure to it. But you're all describing, albeit you're all sort of working towards a GCSE grade, but we've also had a lot of different ways of identifying progress in here. So we've talked about age-related expectations and levels of progress, and that Pearson thing had these steps, which, okay, we'll ignore that. But there are lots of different ways of trying to do it. And I can see it looks as if from Pearson now they've tried to provide a way of doing that that's kind of outside everything else, and maybe that's, as you say, confusing things. But if you were to ask publishers for help with this, I could imagine and they obviously are trying to do that with the publishing they'll be doing for the new Key Stage 3 and for the GCSEs and A-levels as they roll through. I would imagine if I was a publisher listening to this, I'd be thinking, what on earth are we supposed to provide that would help meet as many of these needs as we possibly could? So what kind of things would you be looking for in the way of assessments?
Things like threshold attainment tasks to sort of measure it at different points, what's expected at those points, and something that's sort of scaled, so it's kind of going up the scale, if that all makes sense.
Okay, so you can see they are progressing.
Yes, so you can see the progress, and that you move from this onto that, and then onto this.
Okay.
I think one of the problems that we've got, and I did just type it there, we've had this problem all year with GCSEs and A-levels, because obviously new ones coming online at different times. And I've got heads of departments come back to me all year saying, and it's not just one example, it's 3 that we use. Yeah. They've been coming back from the exam meetings, or, the free training and all that, and actually they can't say that, this piece of artwork is equivalent to a grade B, which is, what it used to be before. So you're as a teacher or head of department, your reference point as to what the certain standard is. If the exam boards can't tell us that, I don't see how the publishers are going to be able to do anything useful, until the exam boards actually kind of come out and say, yeah, this is what we're expecting for grade A or level 9 or whatever. Because if the exam boards can't do that yet, the publishers are
but is there anything they could do? You know, Zoe was saying there about having some sort of scale that shows you are moving through it, and that you are targeting, I suppose, certain GCSE grades if that's your model at Key Stage 3 as well. But is there anything? Is there anything they could do that would help, even if they can't?
Maybe in the interim, it would have to be more skills-based than knowledge-based.
Okay.
Because skills, you can actually move through whatever scale you want, however you measure it. But you can measure things on a scale, can't you? If you do it, so I'm thinking geography because I teach geography. But for all sorts of subjects, you can become more. The skills you use can be more complex and so on as you move through. So it maybe
and knowledge, because it's a very knowledge-driven curriculum now as well, and I suppose that's an easier thing to measure.
Yeah,
knowledge.
Unless you have like series of going back to the old-fashioned tests on facts almost.
Okay. Okay, good. I think we'll leave it at that.
I mean, I think what you're describing here and what we're hearing is just assessment is sort of falling apart a bit. It's going to be practically impossible to hold schools to account, in my opinion. I have to say, I really do think this will, I've said this consistently, this thing will fall apart within a period of time because it is just not sustainable, and we will get something better and more manageable. We have to. It's an absolute nonsense.
Okay. Good. That's a good point to leave that on. Not exactly cheery, but...
Well, here's one to cheer you up. Gove's no longer in the Conservative race. It's just popped up on my...
Oh, really?
Oh!
Hey!
Beat them by 2 women.
Yes. Hopefully that's the last we'll ever hear of him. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have that. Okay, so... good, thank you.
As well.
Yeah.
You said what we're all thinking, don't worry.
Yeah, they had a good... no, I was going to blog about scoffing at Gove when the Remain campaign won the referendum, but sadly I had to forego that pleasure.
That didn't quite work out for us.
Yeah, it didn't really. No. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So moving on to curriculum now, then, which is the next bit. I just wanted to ask you about GCSEs and A levels. So I was in. We have this. I'm chair of governors at my local comprehensive in Cheltenham here, and on Tuesday we had our governor visitation day, so all the governors descend for the day and we spend a day in departments, my link departments, design and technology. And I was talking to the food tech teachers there, and they're saying, well, food tech won't exist as an A level after next year, and so they've been looking to see if there are any alternatives that might go down well, so they've looked at B-Techs and pretty much ruled them out. And they're obviously quite worried because they've been doing phenomenally well with that particular food A level over the years, and now it's gone. So I'm just wondering whether generally in your schools that there are concerns, there are problems being caused by subjects having gone and not being able to replace them, or whether...
yeah, we've had that with creative writing.
Oh, yeah.
Because actually we're very strong in our A levels for things like physics, maths, further maths, that kind of side of things. There's a kind of... sorry, trouble with my words today. Need more coffee. Creative writing has gone down really well and has grown really quickly since it came online a few years ago, only sort of 3-4 years ago, whatever it was. And now they've said they're not doing it anymore after next year. That's a real shame, because for some people that's just been brilliant.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why they're doing that, but yeah, that's going to have an impact on us.
Yeah, we only go up to GCSE, but obviously the changes in the curriculum, which now mean the students do 9 GCSEs instead of more, which they would have done in the past, which isn't a bad thing, but it makes choice more restrictive, and EBAC is, really important within our school measures. So it limits the choices. There's obviously implications for your staffing and training of staff and things.
Yeah, I was going to come on to ask about that.
Context-wise as well, we serve a community that's in the lowest quintile for everything: crime, deprivation, health, education, generational, not going to university. And in terms of the the emphasis and the pressure on the EBAC now, and I know the importance is still going to be the pupil at the centre of everything that we do, but we're still judged, aren't we, as a school on holistically on what we do, and we feel that at the minute our curriculum, or what we're changing to, the model, it's not the best for a lot of our pupils, and at the end of the day, it is them that is going to that's going to lose out. For instance, in ICT, we've led computer science this year, and the struggle from our outstanding teachers delivering the course has been. I mean, I line manage the CAT faculty, and it's been a real issue. You know, in the past they've got fantastic BTEC ICT results, and yet now with that being phased out, and now the computer science and the other aspects, is that what we're finding is the curriculum isn't perfectly suited to our pupils anymore, and I personally feel it is definitely going into a bit more of an elitist system at the moment.
Really?
I think that's the right word as well. Yeah. Because I think... Sorry.
So, Helen, what was that? I couldn't hear that, Helen. What were you saying?
Sorry, I said you end up branding some of these kids as failure earlier on, and they're not failures. That you end up almost, I mean, you wouldn't do it as a school, but, you know, society is a bit, well, you know, if you haven't got that, therefore you failed. I'll give you an example. We've just had, I mean, we're a music college when they were specialism, and we've just had house music today, which is the most fantastic day, and I don't teach music and I'm not musical, but you have every single kid participating in some way, that you have some real talent, and those kids get up on the stage and sing or play or whatever they do. That doesn't count in an EBAC, of course. So, you know, where does that fit into the curriculum? So, and it's the same with, sorry, I don't know who was talking about the kids in his area, not being able to do ICT. Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, and when we talk about staffing as well, is that, you know, I mean, we've always heavily staffed English and maths anyway because we wanted the smaller classes, but we're finding now we've got teachers in a certain faculties who are teaching outside the specialism, and ultimately that is detrimental as well to the pupils, because you can have outstanding teachers and you can talk about skill transfer and being able to deliver across your subject area, but ultimately we're all specialists in what we chose to do as teachers, and you know, to teach outside of our specialism, I would always say, no matter how good they are, that, you know, you would imagine they wouldn't be as good as someone whose specialism that is, and we've got teachers who are teaching 3 or 4 and 5 different subjects now.
Yeah, and there's a limit to it, because subjects such as maths and science, you know, however good you are generally as a teacher, it's unlikely that you can transfer, you know, from a DT teacher to a maths teacher or science teacher.
Can I just ask you that then? Maybe we could just have a quick brainstorm of this in the chat box. I'm just after sort of names at the moment. Which departments do you think are going to be most hit by an increase in non-specialist staff? Which subjects, I suppose? So you mentioned there about English and maths. Are there any others? So I know in the D&T department I was in this week, they were talking about a huge increase there, largely just, I think, because of changes to EBAC, but also because they've suddenly gone from 2 year 10 groups to 4, because just out of popularity, but also because EBAC's P8 actually has driven some of that. So just wondering whether you could just literally list any departments there where you think there's going to be a bit more of a teacher specialist shortage.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I've got the wrong way.
Sorry,
I've put teachers, faculties that I think will be affected by. Yeah. Sorry, I've got it the other way.
Philip, I think you probably need to clarify that question again.
Yeah. So I can't remember what I started off saying. Maybe
you changed your mind. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start from scratch. So I'll type it, shall I? That makes it clear, doesn't it? So which departments will have... I can't think how to phrase it now. There we are. So which departments will have a shortage of specialists? So
So that's a recruitment thing you were talking about.
It's either recruitment or it's because of changes to the curriculum. So
some shortages. So I think this is not going to exist.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's the question. Is where we think frankly where we can lose a technology teacher, we're probably not going to replace them, and we're thinking we'll give that time to English, Math, Science.
Yeah. Okay.
I think what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. So in other words, the design technology department there will be having a specialist shortage. Yeah.
Having said that, you know, the recruitment and retention across the country at the moment is, in those core subjects anyway, I mean, we found it horrific this year to get quality staff in, certainly in English and maths, and we're offering TLRs and a lot more money and lead teachers just to get what I would call a half-decent teacher 5 years ago, just to be able to teach in those subjects. I think that the crisis, unless something's done in this next couple of years, that we're going to have a real crisis in some of these core subjects and the quality of the delivery from teachers.
So much of it is political, though, and we're a teaching school, and we were talking about while the country's economy is doing well, teacher recruitment is bad because people can do alternative things. So maybe if we go into recession, sadly, you know, things may change. But there's so many unknowns and influences on it.
So
strange times.
Yes, it's all incredibly unclear at the moment. So I'm just thinking then, the reason I'm asking you about why shortage of specialists is, so not so much about the recruitment strategy, but I'm thinking more about, again, thinking about what our publishers try to do. So if I was a publisher making a Key Stage 3 science book now, I would be doing it with a view to the fact that I know probably a lot of Key Stage 3 science, particularly in Year 7 and 8, will be taught by non-specialists. So I suppose I'm trying to anticipate
that makes sense.
Yeah, just so whether there'd be other areas where that's likely to be the case as a result of these changes. Have any of you in your schools axed any subjects? Have you taken a deliberate course of action to not offer statistics at GCSE or further maths or a science A level, any of that?
We've been okay this year, and we've offered further maths and statistics for very small cohorts because our pupils just don't tend to do that. But that's only been this year. I think that the next year we won't offer either of those subjects. Definitely not.
We've had dance GCSE has fallen by the wayside because not enough students have opted for it.
Yeah. Right.
Same here, dance.
German.
Dance has gone, drama's gone, and we're fighting desperately hard to try and keep music.
German, Latin, and dance at A level have gone for us.
Right.
We didn't ever do dance at GCSE, but German and Latin are still there at GCSE.
And are those just declining numbers? What's
yes.
There? Okay.
Yeah.
And why have those numbers declined? Do you think is that because of pressure from UCAS applications, or?
I think it's a lot to do with kind of strengths elsewhere. I mean, we're very, very lucky. We have above average ability intake. I mean, we are a comprehensive school and we have got the whole range, but ours is generally, skewed towards the more able, hence the Latin. But they tend to be taking on sort of the maths and sciencey type things. So some of our, straight A-star students that could do any subjects are coming next year to do, to A-level, to do maths, further maths, physics, and perhaps one other.
Okay.
So it's just through the choices being elsewhere rather than a lack of interest in those as
right.
such.
Okay.
I think students are a bit more clued up these days, whereas a few years ago, I think students might have made choices at 16 for their sixth form study based on a real subject passion, and then might have worried a bit more about what the options that opened up a little bit later. I think with the volume of information that's out and about now, students are really savvy when they're choosing and saying, right, actually, I need this combination of subjects, which will give me the choice of doing maybe these 5, 6, 8 degree courses across this range of institutions.
I suppose
but because
£9,000 a year rather.
Well, I was
well,
going to say there has to be a link to the fees and the increase in fees, because you know, I would imagine that students are thinking they want to graduate and be able to work, and as we know, you know, some areas that's still very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So
and there are some. It'll be interesting to see how, as I'm in charge of sixth form, it'll be interesting to see how subjects change or decline, as I think more and more schools and colleges are going to go back to 3. I mean, we're not this year, but probably will next year. Do 3 from the beginning instead of do 4 and drop 1. So that'll have an impact on, you know, which subjects there are as well.
Yeah, we've got a survey asking about that gone out today, actually, so keep an eye open. That'd be interesting to round up what the current thinking is like, because it seems to shift all the time.
And also,
I think it should be acknowledged that schools are probably, depending on your cohort, we've got a higher end cohort, I suppose, nationally. We are guiding them to a more narrow band of choices, in all honesty. They can choose, but they are accepting the advice they're offered by the school and by the independent advice and guidance they're getting, and choosing a narrower range of subjects than perhaps they did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's also harder to change course as well because of the funding implications. So where many students might have done 3 years at A-level or might have done a year restarted, now that's so much more difficult to do. So, you know, you really have got to get your choices right.
I suppose in schools that aren't offering the 4th AS level as well, you have to have got it right at the start as well, don't you? Some of you were saying earlier, last time about that you were going to, and we've had a few mentions of this earlier, to narrow the options for GCSE options because of EBAC and because of P8, the basket thing. And I guess that's now rolled through since we were talking about it. They've done all that option stuff. Just wondering if there's been any reaction to it, if students have been upset or bothered, have they noticed, have parents commented?
We didn't actually narrow it because of progress. We did it purely financially.
Oh, really?
Perfectly honest with you, because but no, that's partly because ours was a higher end group of kids. Generally, they met the PA anyway. To be perfectly honest with you, ours was purely about finance, and so where we could trim around the edges of the bucket 3 subjects, particularly, we did.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, ours has gone down, which in itself isn't a bad thing, because they perhaps did spread themselves a bit thinly, and doing 9, as most of them do now, is good. But that, of course, has also come in conjunction with a narrowing of the curriculum. So consequently, you know, the sort of triple science students have just 1 additional choice. Others may have 2 additional choices, but they're also heavily encouraged to do history or geography. So, you know, it is narrower.
Okay, thanks. So that, yes, we'll move on to finance then, since we talked about finance. It happens to come next anyway. So, yes, the referendum leaving the EU thing, part of what a lot of teachers said when we talked to them about this a while ago was, you know, effect on staffing isn't going to be huge, effect on pupil numbers isn't going to be huge, but the effect on finance, school finances, could be. Now, this chart here is from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who are my favourite economists for telling me about what's going on, not knowing very much about economics myself, but they always seem to. And this is some figures they produced in March, and it was looking at, so obviously pre-referendum, but this was looking, so the dark greens are the way spending's been, so school cost, pupil numbers, and the key one is the 4th column, this one. So from 2010, end of 2010 to end of 2015, percentage change has been a net increase, a tiny net increase over that time. But from 2014-15 to 2020, you can see what the real school spending per pupil change is going to be. It's about -8%. That's also before there were things like something else I just spotted. So I don't know if you saw this, which was we did a summary of the proposals for the national funding formula. I think you can scroll up and down on this yourself now. And can you make it bigger? Try and make it bigger as well. Sorry, it's a bit clunky, this thing.
Too small.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, a bit ocularly challenged.
Yes. It doesn't seem to. It never gives you. Let's just make it full screen for a minute.
Oh, if you press the plus button, it goes. Oh no.
Yeah. Can you control that now? Can you scroll up and down and right?
Yeah.
So I'll just turn this thing. I'll just show you what I'm looking at for a minute. So the national funding formula was obviously meant to be a way of being fair with funding, but I don't know if you spotted that the £600 million has been shaved off it. We had a quick look to see where that was coming from. So 27 million just from manageable efficiencies, so that's basically just gone. So £10 per pupil cut without any sort of indication about where it's going to come from. And that's without factoring in any pay rises, of course. This is just funding. Local authorities won't have any school improvement for them, so if you are still a local authority school, then the LA will have less cash to support you from next year. All that local authority responsibilities will be responsible for is these things, which obviously don't need much money. 40 million, which normally went or has previously gone to local authorities for things like, well, we're just talking about visual and performing arts, but music as well. And outdoor education, that will go. Music hubs are protected, thankfully. And there was this paragraph here for academies, so if you're one of them, I thought this bit was quite alarming. And if you're a mat, it sounds as if the top slice taken off by your mat will have to get bigger. And those are all outside the bit that we were just... Oops. Oh. Sorry, just log myself out of the room. So those are all outside the... Sorry, can you still hear me? You can.
Yeah.
It was just telling me to dial in again, but I don't need to. Sorry, so those are all outside what this Institute for Fiscal Studies chart here was showing. So that's on top of this 8% cut that we're expecting between now and 2020. Doesn't look good, does it? It's quite alarming.
But you can't leave us.
Totally depressing.
So you've got to sort of even this up with something pleasant.
And does that include the, the fact that the staffing and the add-on costs of schools now for pensions, national insurance?
No.
So that's another layer on top.
This, it doesn't. So this is only about the amount of funding that's coming into schools.
Right.
So it's not anticipated.
We really have to look at commercialisation this year. I mean, we've sat down. We've got 6. We're not a teaching. Our head is a national leader in education, so we can support schools quite a lot of SLE work, and he's in charge of another couple of schools. So a lot of our SLEs have got a lot of money coming in that way this year to the school.
Yeah, a lot of teaching schools aren't managing to do that because their SLEs are so busy they don't actually have time to charge.
Yeah, well, I think the advantage is to have that one head over 3 schools has a massive impact. And the other aspect we've had to look at is 4 of us have had to be trained in delivering the Allevi programme, the OTP and the ITP, just again to generate that external income and that external funding. We've not been hit as badly as some other schools because of the deprivation in the area that we serve, but I mean, some of the other local schools in our area, they're facing the massive deficit cuts this next year, and all the issues that we've talked about before in recruitment, retention, and all those other things, it's only detrimental to the schools. It is.
Yeah, it's none of it. The good news, I suppose, there is that teaching schools have got an extension to their funding for another year, haven't they? That sounds as if it's. I thought that might be the first to go. And the national funding formula. One of the things that's worried me about the current situation with the government is that if Nicky Morgan goes as Education Secretary, I just wonder whether that national funding formula will happen. It's been pulled I've been watching it for 15 years, and it's been pulled every time it's been mentioned.
Well, we're sort of in third now anyway, an extended version of it, aren't we? Nothing's going to happen for ages.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't particularly any different anyway, to be honest. No. Still had,
the reality is, Philip, I mean, I'm no defender of Gideon Osborne. However, I'm quite prepared to believe there is no money in the pot. The country's deficit is doubled in the time that the Tories have been in, and I'm not, that's not the political statement, it's just a matter of fact. The tax base of our country is narrowing. Where are we going to get some money? Spending is not, in terms of the level of spending for hospitals, for education, that isn't actually diminishing, but what we're expected to pay for is increasing. There's no easy answers to this at all. If you look outside of the sort of moans and groans we'd obviously have, and that's the bit that really worries me.
And sorry to interrupt, but I don't know whether other areas are affected, but we've got a massive increase in numbers of students forecast over the next 6 years.
What, in your area?
Yes.
Yeah, we have the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think
The authority wants to take another 2-year group. Another 2-form group.
Yes, likewise.
No space. We no room to do it.
No.
We're in a very similar situation, but and the county have been talking about, because we're a local authority school, and they've been trying to work out how they're going to increase the number of places. And I know the business managers sat in a number of meetings around it, and it's been kicked around and kicked around and kicked around, and now basically they've just said, well, do you know what, we're not going to do anything because the Regional Schools Commission will just pop a free school in, because sorry, excuse me, they've got money to do that, and it fits their remit. So there are slight there are certain plans and little get out of jail free cards which can be dropped in, providing the solutions fit the the political model.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a wild frontier out there, isn't it? So, by the way, this link here, I'm just moving around, is a link, if you want to read that after, to that full paper that I just showed you those charts from. Gives a bit more detail about that if you're interested. But the reason I was sort of recapping on how gloomy it is, another thing that I suppose alarmed, scared me when I was in school on Tuesday was that the head of food tech was saying that the school, because it's trying to save on its health and safety budget, has made departments buy their own paper towels.
Oh dear.
We're not that desperate.
No.
Well, I'm surprised to hear that we are, frankly. But anyway, so she was saying that they can't afford paper towels, so the kids are drying their hands on tea towels, which is what obviously they're drying. Not good for health and safety.
No.
And the teacher had all sorts of disease-ridden hands as a result of this.
Lovely.
So quite revolting. But I was just wondering if I'm glad to hear, Matt, that you're not that bad. But I was wondering generally whether is it that bad generally? Are you feeling the pinch already, or are you expecting to feel the pinch soon, or how is the feeling about spending at the moment?
I think the pinch will be with staffing, because staffing is the biggest cost, and it's about not replacing when somebody leaves, careful over recruitment, contracts being temporary rather than permanent.
Temporary contracts.
Yeah, because to be honest, a member of staff would make a significant difference. A few paper towels, it must be negligible, surely.
Yes, you would think so.
Exactly. No, we've moved now to only giving out temporary contracts for a year, and we say when we're doing it, it is dependent on finance.
Yeah.
And that's the situation.
We're looking at a restructure, because you've got to grasp it, really. I mean,
Yeah.
we've tried to sort of trim it over the last year or so, letting people go and not replacing them, but you just got to get it fit for purpose.
It will differ from school to school, won't it? It very much depends on that staffing structure that you have, and whether there is more meat, more fat you can cut from it. I'm just about to join a school shortly that's just gone through a massive process and actually saved a huge amount of money because there was fat to cut, quite frankly.
Okay.
Those schools that have been through that process already and have got themselves down to the bone and still have to find another £200,000-300,000, whatever.
Yes. So do you think, Simon, then that your departments will get less capitation in future?
What, in my new school?
Yeah.
I can tell you that my current school, we've just done it, and they have reduced again.
Right.
I don't know. So it's interesting to talk about textbooks. Textbooks are fit. We don't do textbooks really, particularly. We just can't afford them.
Yeah, we're
quite a big school, although it's a sort of, it's probably just below the national average.
much more control on stuff like photocopying. I know it sounds something so minor, but departments now really have to justify the amount of photocopying that they're doing because it is such an expensive resource for a lot of the core departments. And it's really what we've done this year is actually we're going to give heads of department next year a full breakdown only to heads of department of what their department, how much money spent on their department, not just in budget, in terms of staffing, in terms of resourcing. So every money that the school gives to their department, almost like a mini budget, so they would be much more aware of where their money was going, and maybe to make more staff a bit more accountable as well. I think some heads of department are a bit oblivious to finance. It's something that they just think's done for them or done to them, and we want them to take a lot more ownership in this new climate and make sure that they are really aware of where their money is going and how much is spent on them.
Okay. And what about the, have any of you sort of changed the priorities? So some schools are saying, two schools mentioned to me in some interviews we did last week, that they've created new budget areas. So rather than giving everything through to departments, for example, one school had created an assessment budget area. So rather than everyone buying their assessment materials out of capitation, they had to go through this assessment cost centre.
And who would control that, the bursar?
I think it was a deputy head actually in that case. But I'm just wondering if any of you, rather than just axing here and there, if any of you've done anything different in the way budgets are allocated.
No. We've not done anything different in the way budgets are allocated. We've always been, because we had 10 years ago massive deficit, and it's taken a long time to pay it off. So we're not in a bad position now. But we've got a new business manager. Well, I say new, he's been there a year now. And he's done a great job of kind of looking at bits and pieces, things like insurance and all the boring stuff, like insurance and the gas and electricity and, all those sorts of things. And he's been looking at those costs. And another thing he's done, which hasn't been popular but has saved money, is a whole new printing and photocopying system. So all the individual printers in offices and classrooms, they weren't in every classroom, obviously, but they were in sort of, the IT rooms, the ones that have computers in. But that's all been moved, and we've got kind of fewer, bigger machines, faster machines, but fewer. And from a teaching point of view, it's a blinking nightmare.
Another reprographics person.
Yeah, we have a reprographics person. But if you're doing, I'm doing geography controlled assessment, and instead of the kids printing it out in the corner of the room, they've got to go down the corridor to somebody else to go and log on and print it out and come back, and then it automatically prints double-sided when you can't have it double-sided. But that's the setup to save money. Do you know what I mean? So from a teaching point of view, it's been a nightmare. But from a finance point of view, it's undoubtedly it saves some money.
We've got some very similar system here, and it has saved an awful lot of money. It's been here since I've been in the school, which is now 5 years. But it was brought in at a similar point when a new business manager came in, and it saved a lot of money. It is a complete pain to start with until you get used to it, but after a while, it just sort of becomes
It's the norm.
Yeah, it becomes the norm, and we just do it all off our ID tags and things like that now. And actually, it's reduced quite a lot of the pay. The amount of money that is spending on photocopying and things.
Yeah, is the name of the system called Paper Cut?
Oh no.
Yeah, we've got that. Yeah.
Just interested because we've had that, but it sounds like the same thing.
Okay.
I've just put on the chat pod that what I'd really like to create is this sort of ethos. It's all a bit ideological, but this ethos of vested interest, because there's lots of things wasted, like computers left on, lights left on, unnecessary heating, things like that. And if we look more at the model that, what we do as staff has an impact on our budgets. But I also think with the students, because I was alarmed to find that we were spending £20,000 putting right vandalism on a year-to-year basis, and it's a very big school, and the kids are great, so but there is still this sort of element of things that get spoilt and have to be replaced or repainted or whatever, and again, I think if we could get everybody buying into the idea of this whole thing about what our actions do actually has a bigger impact on everybody. That's what I'd really like to see.
Okay.
We're in a small school, but what we've done is we had a small, you can see our budget going down into a deficit next year, but we had a small pot of funding that we just have invested in the building, so we've got solar panels and so on, and really already saved several £1,000s this year, and that obviously over the next umpteen years is going to actually increase the income for the school.
I think catering as well is apparently one of your big ways of making savings, because we still have local authority catering, and apparently if we do it in-house, there's significant savings to be made there.
You tell the dinner ladies that though.
Well, no, that's the other side of it.
It'll make you loads, it'll make you some, and the quality improves.
Yeah.
We've done it this year in 2 schools across our trust. It's a definite winner.
Yes.
We've got our own in-house and have had for years, and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Far better quality.
Yes, yeah, we do that.
And
Have you all found that it's better quality? That's interesting, because we still use the authority, and I think the quality is shocking, but we've not changed yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Can I just ask you then, so we've had some good ideas about what you're doing about saving money. I just wanted to ask you about what are your main spending priorities for next year as a school? So is there anything that you're particularly thinking that you need to invest a lot in? Are you prioritising spending on, I mentioned assessment. I'm thinking not staffing, obviously. I know staffing is obviously always the biggest stuff, and that has its own sort of limitations as to what you can do about it. But, for example, we've just, in my school, we've just reinstigated the AstroTurf replacement fund, for example. That's an example. 10 grand a year that we're not spending on something more useful. But anything that you know that you're needing to set money aside for next year. And I will also create a sort of opposite poll in a minute about things, I'll work out how to do it, about things that you're spending less on in future.
I can only see the one poll.
Yeah, so I'm just going to get the other one up. It's
Okay, all right.
It's,
Sorry.
Yeah, they upgraded the software this week, and it all seems to have become a bit slow and clunky.
There we go.
It always switches off now for some reason. Oh, it's alright, I'm on it now.
Are you on there now? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I've hidden the chat pod, but won't need that for now. Okay, so
It's fun.
I'm just showing you what's there now.
It's halfway through for me.
Oh, sorry. Is that back?
So every time I go to type it up, I think it It goes back. It's gone now. Okay.
Can you do it now?
No, it's gone. I'll try the other one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think we'll leave it at that for budgets for just now. But we'll
Really
just
depressed all that.
Okay, so the things, spending priorities for next year, staying afloat, we've got staffing, IT infrastructure, pupil premium students narrowing the gap, building cultural capital assessment, well-being of staff, that's nice to see, maintaining standards, new resources for exams.
Interesting one, well-being of staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not a massive amount, but it's such an issue because staff are, you know, the workload issue, etc., etc. So we have tried to implement things like staff breakfasts and staff get-togethers, and we've also negotiated lots of discounts at local. Well, I haven't personally, but the head's PA with local businesses and things to just create a better feeling for people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So things that we are spending less on: capitation and premises improvements, replacing old consumables, spending less on things that don't affect teaching so much. Okay, so that's presumably looking at better contracts. Yeah, we talked about that. And photocopying, less on technology, and basically trimming out the non-essentials. Okay, interesting.
So my parents just arrived now. I'm really sorry.
Okay, yeah. Oh no, that's fine. Thanks. Nice to talk to you.
Thank
Have
you very
a
much.
nice summer.
Yeah, nice to speak to you all. See you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
No, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so I think we'll leave budgets there. It's a sort of ongoing thing, isn't it? Budgets. I guess we could have pretty much the same conversation year on year, and apart from the scale of things, it probably wouldn't change an awful lot. But anyway, so another thing that's happened since we last spoke was the white paper. So I'm just going to drop this on. Just obliterate everything for now. I'm not going to spend long looking at it actually, but so when the white paper was announced just at the start of the Easter holidays, we did a survey of our teachers, and we had about 800 of them respond overnight to tell us what they thought about things. And those are the things we asked about. You can download this off the website somewhere. Probably save this actually. And just scrolling down, we've got a chart at the bottom. So this is, I don't know how readable this is, but it's in descending order of good ideas from the white paper. So people thought it was generally a good idea to advertise vacancies for free via a national teacher vacancy website.
Yep.
So certainly spending on TS would be good. Down at the bottom, you can probably guess what these are. So forcing maintained schools to become academies. So 75% of teachers strongly disagreed with that, which is more strongly than people disagreed with leaving Europe.
Yes.
Not far off that was the development of more multi-academy trusts. So those sorts of things were just generally not liked. And the one just above that, I expect most schools will form or join MATs, and the smallest ones will have to. So those bottom 5 things actually were all to do with MATs. And the way we asked this was we didn't sort of, all we did was, I'm not sure you can see it in the report actually, but all we did was we took statements directly from, no you can't, oh yeah, so like in this poll here, there will be new multiplication tables check in year 6. So we just took these statements from the white paper and we said, do you strongly agree, no feelings, disagree, strongly disagree. And this whole report is based on that. And it was really interesting reading. It was, the strength of feeling was really quite strong. But as I say, the maths thing was the biggest issue. So I'm just wondering whether have you been thinking about that in your schools? Have you been discussing it? Have your boards of governors been thinking about forming a MAT, joining a MAT, or are you already a MAT? And if so,
well, we are. Well, my school is, and the school I'm moving to, they're both schools in one in a newish MAT and one in an established MAT. My current school and people in it, it's run in a very pure way. There's not a lot of difference really in terms of feel to that in a local authority school. And some of the stuff that I read about the anti-academy stuff, it amuses me.
Oh, really?
It absolutely. I mean, and it's just complete and utter lies and misinformation. A lot of it. Now, it's not to say that some academies, that probably maybe run very badly, as local authority schools have been. But being inside one that's being run, I think, very well, and in a very pure and with a great moral purpose. Some of the things you read are just, especially yesterday, the teacher strike stuff. Some of the stuff coming out of that, which it's just the lies that I read. It
Really?
just astonished me.
Okay. And what sort of benefits do you get from being in a MAT then, do you think?
But the fact that we are able to appoint really smart people to work across the trust. So you talk about money. We've got a business manager who's red hot and has helped us make savings across all our schools because A, we've done things collectively, and B, he's able to pinpoint some really great ways of saving.
Okay.
English and Maths, heads of English and Maths, have got advisory capacity across the trust. They're bloody good.
Really?
They're really good and taking things to a different level. That's priceless. We never got anything like that in our local authority.
Right. So do they tend to provide most of the CPD?
Everyone doesn't want to do it.
Do they provide all the CPD in the trust then?
Most of it. Yeah, obviously, as a head, you're free to go and access your CPD where you want. But yeah, there's a lot of really, really high quality peer-to-peer work and networking, which I think is invaluable.
Yeah, the school-to-school support. I mean, we're in an academy now, and fundamentally it wasn't, what I would have ideally chosen. But there were lots of reasons why we are. But and it's growing. But it's about the school-to-school support and the sharing of services and cost efficiencies as well. That if you the more you have in it within reason, then the more cost effective it is.
Okay.
I think a lot of it, the thing that irritates me, I mean, like the lady who's just spoken, I always put myself down as an academy with a heavy heart, because politically, a little bit grim about it, but, you've just from your political roots. However, when you sort of park that, really, you just look at the benefits and the freedoms you have to do what you want that's going to benefit your schools, it's great.
Okay.
There's nothing not to like about it, really, hardly.
Yeah, I think
the downsides.
We're in a quite interesting position because, like, listening to what you're saying, the appeal of the control that you're talking about is really it sounds great. But we're a local authority school in Crawley, and almost there's one other local authority school in the town, and everybody else is an academy, but they're all with different multi-academy trusts, and they. One's sort of like a standalone, but then they've done almost like a locality map with primaries and things like that. And in terms of that school to school support, we're not going to get it. Even if we were to join up with the other school, the other local authority school, it's probably in quite different contexts and quite different positions at the moment. And so we're kind of stuck here going, right, we would have to look a long way outside of our area probably to get to be able to join a MAT that sort of had the right sort of ethos, if you see what I mean, that sort of matched what we wanted to do.
They have to be geographically close. I think.
Exactly, yeah,
yes, they do, yeah.
And we that's the thing, and so we're now sat here kind of going, what do we do? We're in a lucky position actually that. Things are going pretty well for us at the moment on a number of levels, but if we were forced to go, we would find it quite difficult to be able to match up with somebody that kind of shared our values and ideals locally, because they've all gone their own way.
That's the reason why we did go in the end, so that we could control our own destiny.
Yeah,
we didn't want, and there are some sort of quite predatory large academy trusts out there that spread right throughout the country. Not saying we would ever be forced to be part of that, but it's finding a model that works for you, and usually that is a local solution that works best.
Yeah, exactly. But because all the other local schools have gone off with different,
yes,
and they've kind of had their hands forced because they weren't in a similar sort of position to us.
Yes.
They had some quite significant challenges, and so then were swept up and gobbled up. Perhaps is probably a better phrase.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of left us as a small island, really.
So Stuart, you've said you're a volunteer aided school and there's very little benefit. So you're not thinking of converting to being an academy, or if you did, would you have to join a diocesan MAT?
Yeah, that's part of the issue. We're a joint Catholic and Church of England school, which is quite unusual, and it's a little bit political. So the Catholic diocese insists on it being part of a Catholic MAT, which we've got to be very careful of, otherwise it'll obviously alienate half of our students to feed the schools and so on. But we're very reluctantly going to have to join a MAT, and really we're trying to bring as many local schools with us, really just to be, in some sense, masters of our own destiny. But given the chance, I mean, we would stay as we are. I think it's just unnecessary, really, for us. However, you know, the U-turn, it wasn't really a U-turn, kind of forces your hand, really. You've got to go along in that direction. So that other schools have a solution if they got into difficulty, and likewise within the diocese there's an obvious solution for any of their schools that get potentially an unwelcome offset.
Okay, so it sounds as if you're going into it with a fairly heavy, well, not necessarily a heavy heart, but there are issues, aren't there?
Yeah, not through choice. Well, through choice in a way, but we wouldn't have thought out that. We were quite happy as we were.
Yeah.
We've taken the view that, because we went academy 4 years ago, something like that, purely for the money. Politically, none of us really wanted to do it, but we did it for the money.
Yeah.
We're looking at the either joining an existing MAT or setting up a new one. We're kind of investigating the whole lot at the minute, with the understanding that actually we're going to have to do it eventually. So we might as well sort of do it where we're going to get some benefit out of it, rather than just be forced into it at the last minute.
Yeah.
So, just summarising what you said about the benefits of MATs, then, it's between you. It sounds as if some of you are doing it because, and this is the situation my school's in, other schools are forming MATs and we don't want to be left out. Some of you have done it because you can see financial benefits from sharing, like having a brilliant business manager, for example, who can get better deals. There's the additional support that you've got through sharing expertise. Do any of you feel that do any of you feel confident that being in a MAT is going to make the teaching and learning, the performance of students better?
No.
No, I think it'll take people's eye off the ball.
Right.
Well,
That's what you
I don't know. It might do, because if you're talking about, school-to-school support, you might have a school where something isn't going too well, so you've got your support within your MAT, basically.
I think what it is, you don't set it up to do the same old thing. It's a new model.
Okay.
So you appoint people differently. Yeah?
Yeah,
Does that make
sorry.
sense?
Sorry, I lost you a bit there.
Sorry, what I was saying is you don't set this thing up and just do the same old thing. You set up the model and do things differently.
Okay.
So you appoint a super head of maths and English across 3 schools, let's say, because you can now afford to do so, and you can afford to appoint someone of a higher calibre.
Okay. So the
And
cost
therefore
savings.
you get better results because you're getting better advice, better monitoring, better QA,
Okay.
better training.
Okay.
So you set up on a different model. And so don't join and keep doing the same old thing. Do it differently.
Right. We've been trying to. There's a sort of thorny question comes up time and time again when you talk about maths, which is, do they actually improve teaching and learning? And what we've attempted to do this last few weeks is to gather all the performance data for. Sorry, my internet connection keeps dropping. To gather performance data for secondary schools to look at how being in a MAT, how joining a MAT makes a difference. And this data here, it needs to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt, but it is all the MAT data that there is. It's all the schools that there have been, and in secondary schools, that's pretty much all of them now are academies. There are a few thousand generally that are in MATs. Now, can you see this properly? Yeah. So this is a performance of non-MAT schools versus academies. So academies generally have shown this performance. So they increased up to 2012. Now, of course, that's not particularly because.
So what's the scale up the side?
Sorry, it should be percentage, but it's just a fraction out of 1.
Okay.
So yeah, if you mentally convert
the performance of what are you?
This is five A starter Cs, including English and Maths.
Okay.
And are these all like converter academies and transformational academies?
Yeah. So it's all of them, and this
Yeah.
is particularly helpful.
That's the problem there with the stat, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
the academy that was frankly appalling as a local authority school. That's got years and years of inbuilt underachievement in it.
Yeah.
It takes a while to knock that out. So to come up with these stats across a year of it's been an academy for a year, why haven't you transformed it into Eton?
Yeah,
I can tell you why we haven't.
Well, I'll show you what we've done for that in a minute, and I'm really interested to hear what you think about it in terms of criticism of the data as well as the interpretation. But basically, this is just to show that. So first of all, up until certainly until 2010, schools that became academies were the ones that were forced into it because they were underperforming. You can see that, and then gradually. The new government came in and they said, okay, outstanding schools can become academies. So we've got this huge hike up to 2012-ish when the exams started to get more difficult. That's, they put tougher exams in starting in 2010, and the first data came through in 2012, and then it started to go down a bit, which is perhaps a bit alarming. But what we then did was we thought, well, let's see what the impact on when before and after conversion. So this is 2010. So this year here, 2010, is when these schools chartered here converted to becoming academies. So the black dots show, the black triangles show schools which have converted to become MATs in 2010. So before that, these black dots were performing up pretty high, and after that, they've gone down compared to the general population of schools, which gradually from 2007 to 2015 has gradually gone up. Academies, that's the same pattern that we were looking at earlier, so obviously they were poor performing, and that's just the same pattern as we saw before. So for those that converted in 2010, they actually seem to get worse in terms of performance. Now, there weren't very many, so the numbers there are pretty tiny. I think it's about 80 actually converted there, so the numbers are small. If you look at it for the ones that converted in 2011, slightly different pattern, slightly bigger number, but there the MAT conversions have actually started to go up. So, sorry, my internet connection keeps dropping. So in that year, it's actually a slightly more positive picture. And the numbers there are about 120. In 2012, so this is when they converted, again you can see they've gradually started to increase. They're pretty much constant before, they've gradually started to increase. But you notice in all those years they haven't actually increased as much as the general population has. So it's actually really difficult thing to say one way or the other whether there has been any difference. We've looked at all the data. We've looked at it for primary schools as well, which I won't share with you. But in general, all we can say so far is that from all the schools that have converted into academies since 2008, there is no clear picture of what's happened. We also looked at whether the size of the academy makes any difference. The size of the map makes any difference. And you possibly can't get much of a picture out of this medium. So the dark orange dots are the biggest maps. So if you follow the dark orange dots, get my green dot? So that's these ones here. You can see again that they've followed a similar pattern to others. They've gradually increased. The smallest ones have actually shown the biggest increase, but actually compared to normal academies, they haven't really changed at all. So again, even looking at size, there's a big thing about you have to be in a bigger map for it to make any difference. Well, in terms of performance, that's not really coming through. So what's your response to that? Do you say, well, that's not really the point, or well, that's not really long enough, or the data's too small, or how do you respond to those figures?
I think my thing would be really is the way that schools are measured is 5A Star to C or the Progress 8 measure or whatever, but all the time that the grades are statistically sort of manipulated to fit the normal distribution curve, then all we're experiencing is schools are changing place within the deck of cards, if you like. And so if my school goes up 10 places, it means that other schools have to move down. Either one school moves down 10 or 10 moves down 1 or whatever. So depending on how long your data set goes on for, all that it will prove is that eventually, people will probably eventually end up around the median, if you see what I mean. It depends how long that data set runs on for. But we've got, this issue of nationally, are the standards actually changing and getting better, or are they actually really being manipulated so that we've avoided, the so-called grade inflation and that type of issue? Because if you look at our standards, into other education systems, or other assessments again, which are not sort of the standard GCSE measure, but actually the standards in terms of the way that the students are able to perform haven't appreciably changed or improved, certainly, over the last 5 or maybe more years.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether actually it's a bit of a red herring, in that when we talk about school improvement, we're talking about one institution improving, and for that one to improve, another one goes down. And we're always kind of going to be like that, because everybody can't be above average. Even though some people would like it to be.
Said we were.
Yes, I think somebody did. Yeah, I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, it was Michael.
No.
Yeah.
Block it out.
Yeah, but so you're saying you can't really compare a national trend in any sense? Because that's not really the point. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. What I'm saying is, I think it's false that the national trend is your position within the national rank. So, for 1 year, you've improved the ability of the students in your school to respond to the exam questions that were in the paper on that year, in comparison to everybody else.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, any other thoughts about that? Would you expect to see improvement get better in maths generally? Would you, if you were having joined a math yourself, as most of you have, would you expect it to get...
It really does depend on how well they are run and what the quality of leadership staff you have. I think that's the sort of part of the elephant in the room. I guess the question sort of assumes that you've got someone of equal quality running all of these institutions. Well, you might not have.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really hard to measure.
Okay.
I suppose it's over, longer periods of time, which is sad in a way, because obviously for the students, they're in it at that particular point in time. But like with any statistics, it has to be over a period of time. And I guess, you can do what you want with statistics, can't you? I'm not saying it's wrong, but you can change statistics to prove what you want to prove in many ways. So I think you've always got to be pretty open-minded.
Okay. Okay, good. I think possibly the data is just too small to make anything of it particularly anyway. We sort of did this, well, statistically validly, but I think as we found that, as you say, it's for various reasons, the goalposts changed. That suddenly there's a dip in 2012, so we decided to make the exams harder. It changes year on year anyway. It sort of makes you
so many
wonder
variables. You don't know what makes a difference.
No. Good. Anyway, okay. Well, that's a contentious and cloudy issue to leave it on, but we have run out of time. Thank you all very much for taking part in these sessions this year. I've really enjoyed talking to you all, and I'm assuming you'd all want to do this again next year. But anyway,
yes, definitely.
Okay. And yeah, we may start with a different focus next year. So we looked at assessment as the theme for this year, the main half of it anyway, because of the changes that are happening. But maybe next time we'll look at the way the curriculum is bedding in, or maybe you'd like to tell us what we should talk about it. We'll be in touch in September with all that. But in the meantime, keep an eye open for the claim form for getting paid. Is
there any scope next time to sort of be open for suggestions as to what?
Yes,
that would be really good.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's reconvene in September via email, and we'll ask you what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And,
that would be really good.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you all very much. Have a nice summer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a lovely summer.
Right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.